Hello there. What is going on, everybody? Today we are doing our Rebel list of the top ships for Star Wars Armada. This is a series of videos I'm doing. It's sort of a preliminary ranking for how I believe this next year of Star Wars Armada is going to be with the new points and errata updates, how everything has been impacted. It's been a pretty big shakeup to the Armada community and to the Armada meta, and some things will have probably changed a little bit and will continue to change as the Worlds is approaching next month, and depending on what new tricks people have developed, we'll see what counters to those tricks kind of develop after that. I think Worlds is kind of only the start of what the next year is going to hold for us, and if we are, if I'm right, then maybe this is how the rankings will be, but I'll have to revisit these after a while. If you guys are new here to the channel, I do a lot of Star Wars tabletop gaming videos. I'm doing other rankings as well. I'll have links in the at the end, but I'd love to have you stick around. We're doing a $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. If you're already a subscriber, you're already halfway there. Just let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Do you agree with any of the order of these ships on my list, or do you disagree? I'd love to hear about it. Plus, we have links to our Discord and all that other stuff in the video description below. Well, now, the rankings that I've done here, the reason for these rankings are that I am taking a little bit of my personal bias in there, but it's not just my opinion. It's also what I think is going to be the best competitively. Where do I think things are sort of between what I like and what I actually expect to do really well. There may be some things that I really like that are lower on the list. There may be some things that I like less that are on the top of the list. And of course, we will revisit this as as the year gives us new information. All right, so that's about it for the preliminary stuff. Let's go ahead and jump into my rankings of the worst to best Star Wars Armada ships for the Rebellion. Again, full disclaimer, just because I think it's maybe on the bottom doesn't mean that you should think it's also on the bottom. And also, none of these ships are terrible. They're all good ships, but some of them I think are better than others, and hopefully I can explain to you why as we get through each one. Starting off with the Rebel Providence. This ship is a weird one. It is so weird that I put it at the bottom spot. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's actually got some interesting things. It's got a native salvo on it, which isn't bad, especially with 3 different rainbow dice in the rear arc. It is very slow, however. Very slow. And it doesn't have a lot of the upgrades that you'd want a big ship with rainbow dice to have. It doesn't have turbo lasers, ion cannons, ordnance, or any of that stuff. It doesn't have a defensive retrofit, but it does have a very, very weird and interesting, unique sort of setup of upgrades, which are just very weird. Weird is the best word to describe this ship. It definitely has a place, but it's it seems to work best with dealing with squadrons, with double weapons team and support teams, and of course offensive retrofit. There's some things in there that will let it work with squadrons or boarding teams, although boarding teams is also weird because it's too slow to get in there and get really close. There's ways to make that work if you put engine techs on it and things like that. But on the whole, it kind of wants to be a carrier. At the same time, it only got a squadron value of 2. So it's just in a very weird spot. And yes, it's only 95 points, but with that many upgrades, to get the most out of it, you have to put a lot of upgrades on it. And then it ends up being a lot more expensive. And I think there's other ships that do what it does better. But it is possible to do some unique things with this one. But it's just so weird and bizarre that I couldn't justify putting it higher above other ships that are generally better, in my opinion. So that's where we're starting out with the Providence. Moving up, it's the MC-80. Now, of course, I'm talking about both MC-80s. I do lead off with the Command Cruiser. There's been some points reductions for this ship, as well as the Home 1 title. And I think, in the absence of that, this one might have been in the bottom spot. But I think it's risen up a little bit. I don't know if it's enough to make this ship better. And that's kind of where we're at. I think this. I mean, of course, it's an iconic ship, and it's a ship that has good table presence. It's a good ship that I think every Rebel player should have one of. But it's just expensive, and it's harder to field, and so that's kind of where we are. It's nothing personal against the ship. I just, you know, it's always been very expensive for what it does. It lacks certain things. The Home One, for example, the Home One title is the best title for it, but at the same time, the Home One title only affects everybody else. So it ends up being a really expensive support ship that, you know, isn't as good as you'd like it to be. Especially no weapons team on here. I would have loved it if it had that, or if the Home One could have affected itself. But at the end of the day, it's you know, it just doesn't really quite do it. Heavily shielded does still make for a good flagship. It still has a place in some fleets. It's just it's harder and harder to find a place for it that isn't better served by something else like an MC-75 or what have you. So the MC-80 kind of falls lower in the rankings. Up next, the MC-80 Star Cruiser. This one, I think, is going to see a little bit of an uptick. It's a solid ship. It doesn't do anything wrong. It just, you know, I don't know. It's just not a ship I get excited over. And so there's a little bit of personal bias here that puts it lower. I do think it has the chance to rise, though. And it really boils down to how well I think the community as a whole and how well the new Maydeen gets received by the community and how well he actually ends up working out. I think, you know, he will allow ships to be able to, you know, he gives you a free yaw. He used to be a ship that worked really well with this one, but I think he works well with everybody now. And so if the community starts using him a little bit more, and this could open up more doors where this can now afford to concentrate fire a little bit more, taking advantage of gunnery team, while not necessarily, you know, suffering due to that relatively bad yaw on its ship, you know, navigation chart, then that might make it rise a little bit higher. But at the same time, I'm also cautious that while if people start using Maydeen and he ends up working out really well, people will say, hey, well then we don't need to use, we can use him on other fleets and we don't need the MC-80. We can use them with other ships like MC-30s and other things that can take better advantage of them, and that might happen. However, MC-80 is still not bad. It's still a good ship. It's got double brace also, and you know, maybe you know, yeah, you don't have the defensive retrofit, but you know, double brace is still pretty cool. So it's not bad. It's not bad. It definitely has a place in some fleets and can be very effective in some fleets. I think it's in some ways it's a little outshined, and it doesn't necessarily want to just come straight at you like an Imperial Star Destroyer does. It kind of showed up to be like the Rebel Star Destroyer, but without a defensive retrofit or other things that, you know, like the Rebels kind of want a side arc. You know, you have Akbar, and that's kind of a big strength of the Rebels, and his ship kind of feels a little out of place, I think, is where I'd put it. Again, not a bad ship, but I think you have to really build for it. I think it works with like this and Nebulons and Maydeen and things like that. I think there's a way to do that. And so again, not a bad ship, just, you know, maybe outshined. Coming up, the Nebulon-B. This is one of my favorite ships, but still not super high in the rankings. The Nebulon-B is, you know, used to be a little bit more prominent before Yavaris got nerfed. It's still a good ship. It still does great. It has another title. It has a couple of good titles. It did see, you know, some titles come down in price a little bit, although the ship itself hasn't changed a whole lot. I do think the Nebulon-B is probably going to stay at about the same power level. I don't think it's gonna change too much. I always have had the joke about Akbar Nebulons. One of the reasons I love that is because they're generally seen as a weaker ship because of their weaker side arc and the one shield on the side and no redirects. But I think we've seen enough things to overcome that weakness with, you know, auxiliary shield techs that you can put on that support team to kind of buff the sides up to 2 on the first turn. You know, in different things like that. I think there's a lot of ways to you know, to get their shields higher. There's a title that gives you you know, a redirect token and stuff. So Nebulons are still in an interesting spot, and I still think, you know, at their relatively cheap price point in double brace and 5 hull, that they still have a place in the game. They can be a nice support ship. Their titles are decent, not great, but decent. And, you know, they have decent mobility as well. So overall, they're decent at a fairly cheap cost, and in the right setup, they can work wonders. So, you know, that kind of puts them a little bit in the middle. Moving up, it's the Pelta. We're starting to get into some of the better ships here. The Pelta is not one of my favorite ships in the game, but it plays a crucial part, and it gives that fleet command for your fleet. That upgrade on its own is a great upgrade, and doesn't come usually on cheap ships. It's a, like the Empire has to spend like over 100 points to get theirs, and this little guy, and I have the assault ship as the top one here, but they're both okay. But I like this one. I mean, usually when I'm taking a Pelta, it's for fleet command, and so cost becomes the issue. It's not that I'm taking an attack ship. Usually it's a ship I want to kind of keep safe because I don't want to lose that fleet command. But if you want to intensify firepower in your MSU fleet, like, this is the one to go. It's an amazing ship. It can also function as a flagship. It does have brace, has 5 hull, has respectable shields, and good defense tokens, even though there's only 3. It's not too fast, but at least it has 2 yaw at speed 2. So it has a little bit of maneuverability for its slower speed. And overall, it's not a bad small ship. But really, the hallmark of this ship is that fleet command. That's the biggest thing that really makes this ship shine, and that's where I put it. That's why I put it here. All right, moving up, it's the CR90. Look, CR90s are great. They're always been great. They've always been a phenomenally good rebel ship. They're the fastest ship in the fleet. They've got excellent maneuverability. They're cheap. And they work really well with things like turbo laser reroute circuits. They're very good for that. Only reason they're not higher, I might have put them a little higher, but the Jaina's Light, which was kind of always stapled onto a single CR90, went up a pretty big amount. And so they become a little more expensive. So maybe people will take them just a little bit less over the course of this year. I still expect to see them pretty predominantly, though. I still expect to see CR90s in Rebel fleets an awful lot. Jaina's Light's still a very, very good title, and against the right objectives, it can be a lifesaver. So, and the fact that it's good poke damage, it's consistent poke damage, it can afford to stay very far away. The evades have gotten better too. CR90s have gotten better ever since the Clone Wars and Armada 1.5 came out, and we have the evades that actually can do better things, and you can get rid of 2 dice if you want to sack them, and you've got 2 of them, so you can sacrifice those evade tokens against larger ships. Getting rid of multiple dice just increases the survivability of this ship a lot, and so yeah, pretty good ship. Moving forward, it's GR75. I mean, it fits into every fleet. Rebels almost always have GR75s. You've got to have those little support floats. You got fleet support, and you need that. It's so good. You can hand out tokens. Rebels really like this guy for Bomber Command Center also. Rebels have a lot of bombers. They like to do those fleets. It's a thematic thing to do, and it's a really annoying thing to do. But GR75 is a great ship. So cheap, to 18 points. Now you have no guns on this thing except for anti-squadron guns. There is also the combat retrofit, which has front and rear guns, but I mean, you're taking a GR75, you're taking it for the cheap cost and for the ability to support your fleet, and a cheap activation too. So this is definitely the superior version. But yeah, GR75s come in. I think this is at number 5. So we're in our top 5 at this point. Could have been higher too, possibly. I mean, they're crucial. They fit everywhere. So there's that. And under number 4 is the MC-75. So MC-75 is just a great ship. It's got also really great titles, and I think it's been made a little bit better with the last updates for the black dice upgrades that we've got. We've seen, we can really pump this guy up to like 5 black dice in his front armament now, which is like insane. Speed 3, okay maneuverability. Not terrible, not great, but I mean, still pretty good. Dice all around, no weak sides on this thing. It's really a sight to behold. It's a crazy good ship. Also comes standard with that defensive retrofit. I put the Ordnance Cruiser on top, but both versions are good. They offer slightly different things, but this is a really good. Also, like, it's a good anti-squadron platform. And that's not enough to make it this high, but the fact that it does so many other things good also, it's like it's good everywhere. It's good at long range. It's good with Akbar. It's good as a flagship. It's got the defensive retrofit. It's gonna stay alive. It's just all around good. So that's why I put it here. I'm a big fan. And it's got good upgrades that really complement what it does, too. Like 2 ordnance and weapons teams, really strong. And if you build it as an anti-squadron platform, and your opponent doesn't have squadrons, it's still incredibly deadly. So, I like the MC-75. And also, Profundity, this is just a crazy good title for it, too. I mean, that's not the only good title, but that's a very special magical title, too. So, number 4. Number 3, maybe the ugliest ship in the game. Maybe. Some would say. Some might disagree. It's my opinion that this would be a lot more higher on other people's list if it had a better physical design and looked a little bit more sleek and looked a little bit more Star Wars-y, if that's a thing. The Assault Frigate Mark II. I put the Mark II-B on here, but they're both good. And I think I like them both for different reasons. I like the Mark II-A a little bit more if I'm going with a salvo build with assault frigates. If I'm adding upgrades that are going to give it salvo, it has an extra die in the front and rear printed arc, which would give it a 3-die salvo if I'm going with the Mark II-A, but for a higher cost. More often than not, though, I tend to be taking the Mark II-B, so I think that one kind of tops the Assault Frigate Mark IIs. This is a well-rounded ship. It's a jack of all trades. It does everything pretty good. And I mean everything. It's a good flagship. It has defensive retrofit. It's got 6 hull, brace, evade, and redirect. A lot of shields. Like, it's a solid flagship. It's a solid, very good, maybe one of the best carriers in the game. Not the best, but one of the best, for sure. Really good carrier. It's got the weapons team, which is good for squadrons. It's got the offensive retrofit, which can help for squadrons. It's got squadron value of 3, and of course it's got that survivability, which means it's a carrier that's hard to take down. Very good for that. And it's a good attack ship, too. Fits extremely well in Akbar fleets, but doesn't need to be in only Akbar. Can also work well with Sato or a lot of other different fleet styles. I feel like because it's a jack of all trades, it fits into just about all fleets, and it's not too expensive, which is also another cool thing. Again, so very well-rounded. I think it's fantastic. Also can go speed 3. Also has, average maneuverability. So again, it just does everything right, and that's really cool. And it has turbo laser upgrade too. So awesome ship. Love it. Although it's ugly, but it's still beautiful. All right, number 2, MC-30s. MC-30s are complete death machines. They're absolutely vicious, and they're probably one of the biggest threats the rebels have ever had. They're assassin ships. They're so nasty, and they have been made better and better consistently. When the Clone Wars came out, Armada 1.5, we saw the evades get like way more useful than they used to be, and that works perfectly with the MC-30. They have titles that make evades better, that also are amplified even further by the 1.5 rules changes. And then the titles also got better with the recent update, which did increase the points, but also increased some of the usability. So again, MC-30s have their survivability has increased. It just keeps increasing, and their lethality doesn't go down. They're just very, very nasty with all the black dice they can throw out there, and somehow still manage to be nearly impossible to kill. You kinda, in a lot of cases, it's best to just ram this thing if you can. So yeah, they're really good. I put the torpedo frigate on top, but both versions have their place, although they fly a little differently in different fleets. The torpedo frigate is more likely to fit into just about any fleet when you need an assassin ship. Although I don't usually see 3 or 4 MC-30s in a list, although I'd love to see that at some point. It sounds very interesting to me. But yeah, MC-30 at number 2. And number 1, a lot of my bias goes into this, but I hate this ship because it is so good. It's the Starhawk. The Starhawk is like almost oppressively good. It's so good. There are sub-factions of the Armada community that have ruled it out and said, nope, nope, no Wave 8 ships, no Onagers and no Starhawks. We're not using them. They're illegal in our tournaments. It's that good. And it's obscenely good. I think I would have liked this a lot better if it had been given the half points rule that superstar destroyers have, that the huge ship half point rule. I personally think it should have applied to all ships, but at a minimum, it should apply to large ships, at least the Starhawk. 14 hull, 4 defense tokens, 6 shields in the front and 4 on the sides. Only 2 in the rear if you can manage to survive getting around it. Dice everywhere. It's 140 points, so it is expensive. But this thing, it's just impossible. It's impossible to kill, right? Like, I say that with an asterisk because, of course, yes, they have died. Or at least there's rumors that Starhawks have been killed. I have never lost a Starhawk. Every time I've ever fielded one or more Starhawks, I've never had one come off of the board, except when the game is over and we're just moving to the next table. But I've never lost. I've come close, but I've never had a Starhawk die. They're just, now granted, if you had the half points rule, then, you know, hey, getting 7 damage on a Starhawk and gets you a lot of points, I think that would be great for the game. But yeah, they're insane, especially when people run a gate on the Starhawk. That makes it that truly makes it unkillable. But I usually run the Starhawk without a gate because I feel like that's almost like a cheat code. You know, it's like it's that good, and that's why I don't like it. But I have to give it the #1 spot because I still think it's by far the best Rebel ship. I mean, it's so unkillable. People make these Starhawk 134 lists where it's just like, I'm just going to farm objectives. I'm going to heavily bid for second player so I can get an objective that lets me farm, like firing lanes or something. And then I just sit there and camp, and you can't kill me, and I'll just win on points. You know, like that's bizarre to me. You know, like that it's just it's almost an instant win button. I would have loved to seen some kind of nerfs to the Starhawk. Whether it be the half points rule or some other, price increase or something like that. But that's not what we got. So I expect the Starhawks to stay at #1. But maybe something will change. Maybe some new strategies will be found with all the recent updates that just completely obliterate the Starhawk. Maybe it boils down to, people having way more black dice because of the ordnance upgrade changes, and maybe Starhawks will end up getting blown up more consistently and turn out to be a liability to people that field them. I don't think so, though. I think it's going to stay at #1. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. That's our Rebel list. Did I get it right? What do you think? Or did I miss the mark on a couple of these ships? Let me know down in the comments section below. And let's stay tuned for the next video. If you missed the last Imperial one, I'm going to have links over here. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are amazing and help make this whole channel possible. I will talk to you later. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. And always wash your socks.